Hello, my data farm. Welcome to my channel. It's Henry, your favorite data engineer. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how to implement a conditional statement or logical statement in SQL or in SQL. The same way we're going to implement a logical or conditional statement as well in PySpark. We're going to implement the same thing in SparkSQL. Why is this important? The reason why you need this is for data categorization. You'll be able to categorize data. You also use it for transformation to help the business analyst, the ML engineer, and AI engineer to be able to use it for their work as well. Doing your transformation, if you're a data analyst, you also need this in order to be able to make meaning from the data that you have, right, from your system. That is why this is very critical. So come with me and let me teach you how you can implement this conditional statement or logical statement in SQL, PySpark, and SparkSQL. Yeah, let's start. All right, just as stated, we're going to do the when clause, right? When condition. And in this video, we're going to make use of default data provided by Databricks Free Edition, right? The Databricks Free Edition, that's what we're going to use for implementing this when clause or categorization. We're going to take a look at some data, sample data, and then provide the code in SQL first, and then PySpark, and then SparkSQL. Let's just take a look. So to go to the sample data, you click here, and then you go to the catalog. You take a look at samples, right? We have samples, and in this table, for this particular video, what we're going to use is a claims sample table. A claims sample table. So let's look for that. So there's it. This claim sample table. If you realize your serverless is not enabled, you have to start it, right? That's the only compute resource. You start the serverless, your compute resource, and then you take a look. Let's take a look at the table, the columns that are available. You can see we have quite a number of columns and the comments about the column, what they describe about the column. Let's take a look at the actual sample data, right? And this is how it looks. So HVID are IDs. Okay, great. And we can see we have all these columns as well, which are now. Okay. In this particular one, what we're going to base on to do our when clause is the claim type. The claim type. We're going to look at the claim type, and then we're going to use it to build our when condition, right? And when condition, if you already understand Excel, right, you can translate the if statement or the if condition in Excel into SQL. That is simply the version from Excel to SQL. Excel is if statement, in SQL is case when statement, right? It's case when. So this is the data we're going to use. Let's take a look at the distinct or the values that are the unique values that are in this particular column. To do that, let's open a new query editor and just take a look at. Let's use this particular tab and go to the queries and create a new query. So let's name this case, and then let's take a look at the column. As I stated, let's take a look at the distinct values in this column, right? Let's take a look at what is there before we decide our categorization. We want to know what are the distinct values in this column. Then we assign clean names or clear names to it and categorize it based on how we want to use it, right, for better understanding. So we come here. Now we already know to start a query, you need to decide which table you are going to pick the information from or your data. So always start your query with from. So you are telling the query engine that go to this table, right? So take this table and you tell Jackson, what do you do with this table? So select. All right, so in this case we are going to select, as I stated, we just want to see currently, we want to see what is within these queries, right? What is within this table or this column. Then we can decide what we'll decide, how we'll categorize the data, right? So we then take a look at this column, that's claim type. We take a look at, so if we do claim type this way, it pulls just that column for us. Let's run it and take a look at what it pulls everything in that column for us. But right now we don't know the distinct, so we want to see the distinct before we decide on our categorization, right? So what you do is just find a distinct this way, distinct claim type, and it will take out duplicate and everything and give you the unique. So these are the two things that we have here, a P and an I. And looking at the data that is here, we want to agree that what we want to do is P means pending. Your claim is still pending or it's in process, right? Pending. And I will still mean in progress, right? Pending and in progress. That is the categorization we want to make it, so that it becomes clear for anyone who takes it and know that, okay, P simply means pending and I simply means in progress. So let's just keep that here. We are going to add a comment, right? A comment which when you run, it doesn't affect the code base. So here P means pending and I means in progress. Yeah, this is how we're going to categorize it, right? To make it clear for us to be able to understand what P and I simply means, right? And that is what we're going to do, and take a look at how it shows. Okay, so what we're going to do is, now let's begin with our select statement to categorize this. So case when is telling SQL that, look at this case, when this value is equal to this, then give me that, else nothing, or do something, right? That is all it's going to do. Do you get? So we're going to begin by selecting the columns that we want to add to this table. So all we need is, we are going to select just this one to these four tables: the claim ID, claim type, date of service, and diagnosis code, right? In addition to the conditional column that we work on. So we say from the table, from this table, select, what will you select? We have the first column, HVID, comma, claim ID, claim underscore ID, and we have claim type, comma, we have date service, finally we have diagnosis code, let's run this and take a look at the data that comes up. Great. So this is what we have. This is what we have for the code we just wrote. Now let's bring the case when in. Now we would want to write it beside the column that we are implementing the case when on, so that we could easily do a matching and take a look and be sure that this particular categorization worked or not, right? So let's begin. We say to begin a case when, and we know the word case when, so that is simply what we do, right? Case when claim type, right, is equal to, you can do it this way, is equal to P, then give us, convert that P or change the P to pending, right? This telling SQL that anywhere in this column, right, in this column where you see P, when you see P, then provide us with a word and replace it with pending, right? This is going to create SQL engine is going to look at this column, look at each value, and then see if it matches this. When it does, or if it does, then it will give us pending. That is what we're going to do. We can then close it and also say aside P, the next one we will do is this one, the I, right? So you say else, if it is not P, then it is something else, right? In this case, we only have two categorization. We only have P and I. We could decide to say else when, right? But in this case, because it's two options, we just say else give us in progress, this way. Now, when you open a case when, you need to close it and give the column a name, right? So we say end as. So we are closing the case when. You close it with the end as, and then make sure that the column has a name. So we will say claim. We call the column and the name, just as we have claim type here, this service, diagnosis code, the column names that are given in here, right? You need to give the column for this categorization when it happens or when it's done. So we say else give it end as claim category, right? Comma. Now let's run this and take a look. Great. So you can see, let's take a look. You see this worked. Let me open it. So you can see what happens. So this P has been changed to, we have a new column called claim category, right? Claim category. And with this, we already changed the category from P to pending. And you can go down and then take a look. I is now in progress. So that is how you implement case when statement. Very simple, very easy. It's just as implementing an if statement in Excel. With that logic, you can just transfer it into SQL, and that is how you do your case when. Even with the column or with the naming of the columns, you can decide to put it in bracket curly inverted commas this way. I think since you're aligning to break syntax error. Yeah, we just leave it just as it is. Yeah, you just leave it as it is, and then we got the case when statement, right? And that's how you are able to categorize your data, right? Great. Let's move on to the next option, which is PySpark. How you are able to implement this same thing in PySpark. And to do this, we already know PySpark. You need to use a notebook to start the Python engine, right? Or to change the language to Python. So let's create a notebook. Notebook in this case, and name it PySpark when. Right. And in PySpark, we are going to call columns. I'm going to implement this in two distinct ways, right? So let's name this one version 1, and we'll have version 2, which will teach you the same thing but coding it in slightly different ways, right? But we will achieve the same result, right? So to do this, let's also call in the models, the Python models. We already know now this is in Python. Let's call in the Python models that would help us to implement this. To do that, you need to implement call from PySpark dot SQL dot function import. You can import star, which you import every function in the SQL functions in PySpark, right? So we import everything, and then we create a data frame. We need to create a data frame for the table, for this table that we have. And to create that data frame, we will name this data frame claims equal spark.read.table. It's a table that we'll be reading. So if it's a CSV, you give it CSV options. So we create the data frame. Now we have this data frame, right? And then we create a new line. We go to the next line, line 2. Let's display claims. So let's run this, and let's wait for it to run. Sorry, this should be functions. Okay, now this should run. Import functions from Spark. Now as this is running, this is claims also. Yeah, now the statement is running, and we can see the performance, right? How it's running. Now it's done. This is the data frame, and if we run this, we should be able to see the data, and then we implement. Yeah, so this is the data we want, right? This is the data we want. This is the data we want. Great. You can export it to CSV and all that, but it's huge, so that'll be a headache. Let's go to the next line, and what we'll do here is now we're going to implement our select statement on the data frame that we created, this claims data frame that we created. And in that select statement, that is where we're going to implement the when statement as well. So let's create another data frame, right? Let's create another data frame. So let's say claims underscore data frame should be equal to the claims data frame that we had previously dot select bracket open, this way, right? And we know there are various ways by which we can call this, right? So we could just call the columns directly in the select statement that we have. So we can just call it straight up HVID from claims dot HVID, because we already have the data frame, which is claims, right? And we know the content of claims. This is it. We know the columns that we also want, right? So HVID, we have claim ID. So claim underscore ID, comma, and then we have claim dot underscore claim type, comma, and date service diagnosis code. Claim dot date service claim dot diagnosis code. Right. So these are the columns that we need, right? Then we can display this. We can display this and see what happens. We just want to see how it looks, right? So this is what we see. This is what we have. Just these columns are what we need. Now let's implement our case, our when statement on this particular in this particular code base. So just as we did, we have it here just closer to the claim type so that we could see how it worked or how it's implemented. So we have, in this case, you're going to begin with the when statement, right? When, so this way, when in PySpark, that's how you implement it. When, and you can have saying that when claim type this way, when claim type is equal, this is how you bring your equal to, is equal to P, right? When your claim is equal to P, comma, give it, change it to pending this way, right? That's how we do it. When the claim type is equal to P, the result should come as pending. Change it to pending. Dot otherwise, right? Otherwise, what you do is this time you not bring I equal to that. No, it's just when otherwise. Do you get? Otherwise, give us in progress. This way. And then we have what you need to close and give the column a name. Dot alias. Alias. We call the column claim category. Right. So let's run it. So when we run it, you can see, let's run it again. When we run it, you can see that the when case statement, the when otherwise statement just run. So we can see pending, P is changing to pending, and I is now in progress, right? This is PySpark. This is how you implement case when statement in PySpark. It doesn't follow like how the SQL works, right? This is what you do. You implement when this way, right? And say that when P or the value, this is how you do equal to in Python. So that is how come you do to equal to. Once it becomes one equal to, it becomes a variable you are assigning, right? Or it becomes a data frame you are implementing, right? But if you want to do equal to, you do two equal to signs this way. So when it's equal to P, then you give pending. Otherwise, this. There is another way for you to implement this same thing, right? There is another way, but let me show you another way to call this column as well. These columns that we have in here, you can choose to call it this way, or you can choose to call it the second way that I'm going to show you. So this also works, this implemented as well, right? But let me teach you another way of calling these columns as well. So the same way, we will maintain the claims diff, right, and call the claims table. data frame, which we already know is the original data from the source. So with this one, let's say claims data frame v2, right, equal claims dot select open bracket. And you already remember we imported SQL functions from the PySpark, right, model, right? We imported all these models from PySpark, so we could make use of any function that we want to use. So in this case, what we're going to use is column this way, and then you have open bracket this way, HVID this way. This also works. This is also going to call the column perfectly for you. If you implement it this way, you can see this one like object oriented programming, where we call the column from the object, right? But in this case, in the second case, we're just using straight up call the function column to call the column directly. So column into bracket, we're going to call claim ID, comma, column bracket, claim type, comma, column. Same way we have date service and diagnosis code, date underscore service, and we have diagnosis code this way, and we can display our claims this data frame we have. So when we run this, we should get the same data frame and everything, right? Yeah, so you can see we have the same data frame. This is another way of implementing this same thing, calling the same columns, but in this time we're using a function called the column, right? And we can implement the same when bracket column claim underscore type equal p, comma, then give us pending this way, dot otherwise give us in progress dot alias. Alias simply means we rename it, we're giving the column a name, right? A different name, else PySpark will pick a name that it wants to give. It might not be what we prefer. So claim category this way, comma. If we run this should also work, right? This should also give us the same result as we had. Yes, perfect. So you can see this gave us the same result as we wanted, right? This also works. This is another way of calling a column. You can call it this way if you prefer, right? Or you can call it these columns this way. This also works as well. They all work in PySpark, right? That is the way of implementing. That is how we implement when statements in PySpark. I'm going to teach you a version 2 of this, right, for PySpark, where we're going to use a withColumn function to create a case the when statement. And with this, what it does is, after you've called all the specific columns that you need, you are going to bring the when clause at the end of the whole code. So it just adds as an extra column that you are adding to it. You're not going to call it within your select statement this way, but you're going to call it outside your select statement after you've done all your select statement as well. So let's implement that. So Let's create a new data frame, PySpark. When you call this v2, right? The same way we are going to import this SQL models from Spark SQL, right? So from PySpark dot SQL dot functions import star. Yeah, and then we create a claims data frame. Claims equal spark dot read dot table, because we're reading from a table. The table name, we can go back, or if you remember it, that's a 3 namespace that Databricks requires that you give, right? So we have this, and we can create this. This will provide us with the same data frame with the same data, so there's no need for us to take a look at the data anymore because we already know what is in there. Now we want to create claims data frame equal claims from this data frame. We want to call this data frame dot select open bracket. Just as I showed you, you could use any of these options, call this way, or you could call the columns using this method as well. All works, they are the same, they just work. One is just easier, the other is also just understand, you can easily understand, you can also read them, so there's no big deal in that. So but in this video I would prefer to use this method for myself. It's a personal preference. I'm not saying you should do that. So what I need is hvid, comma claims dot, the next column is claim id, claim type, claim id dot claim type, comma, we have date service and diagnosis code. So we have dot date service dot diagnosis underscore code. Yeah, so we have this way, this what we have, right? Now let's implement our case when. As I said, you see, you realize we didn't implement the case when within this particular select. What we just want to do is to add the case when at the end. No, add the case when at the end as a new column in this, but with this it counts differently. How you implement it, what you can do is, we can do is dot with column. We are adding an extra column to this data frame. So you can see we have this table, this column, this 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 5 columns in here, but we adding an extra column at the end. That is why we're saying with column. So this particular function adds extra column at the end of every selected or data frame that you do, right? You could call it as a new data frame, but I just want to continue with this particular data frame, adding it as an extra column. So with column this way, then you need to give the column name. This is, in this case, you give your column name first. So we call this column, what we call it was claim category, right? Comma, then we begin with our when statement. When we can use the same when claims dot claim type is equal to p, then give us pending, right? This way dot, sorry, this way dot otherwise give us in progress, this way. Now with this, you are not going to bring dot alias because you already named the column, the new column, as claim category at the beginning. With claim category, with column, it requires that you give the column name first. You bring the column name first before you continue with whatever code or whatever analysis you want to do, right? That is how with column works. So with this, if we run it, we should see claim category as the next column over here, right? And let's check if this particular code worked. So let's display. What we are going to display is this. So let's take a look if our code base or when clause worked. Perfect. But you see, in this case, the when clause or the new column is no more closer to the claim type. It's now at the end of the table, right? At the end of this data frame. So now we can see this is now here pending, and in progress also worked, right? So you can see it implemented perfectly just as we want it. So we've categorized this table or this data as we want it to be. For you to get a good understanding, I'll give you one thing. What you need to try on your own, try to implement the calling the columns using the call function, the column function that we taught, this one. Try doing the same thing with this, but in this time around using the withColumn on your own. You could try that, and that would help you understand how this particular things work. That would be great. So that is for PySpark, right? That is for PySpark. We're moving on to implementing this same logic in SparkSQL. Let's go on and do that. To do that, what we need to do is also create a notebook, right? A notebook. We need a notebook. And we know SparkSQL, it means we're writing a SQL code by using Spark engine to run it, right? So we will still need the Python framework and all that, right? We still need Python to run it and some models, if possible, we use it to run it. So we call this Spark SQL case statement this way, right? Okay, with this, what we need to do is let's just create our import our models ideally, but we will not mainly use a lot of models in this, but from PySpark.sql.functions import star this way, right? Now let's create a data frame. Claims equal Spark.SQL. So you are telling Spark that you are going to write an SQL function, right, within that. So bracket open, then you can bring invert quotation marks 3, 1, 2, 3 this way. Then you bring it down, you write your SQL function within it this way. So we're just going to write the same SQL code that we did to categorize it in our first example in here. So select from. Ideally we begin with from, right? From, we call this table. From this table, right, what do we need? We need HVID, comma, we need claim ID, comma, we need claim type, comma, we need date underscore service, comma, we also need diagnosis code. Yeah, this is what we need. Right. So you can see my indentation is very clear. It tells me that you need to indent your codes very well. Indentation helps with making your code visible, readable, understandable, maintainable, right? When you are not there, someone can take it, read it, and understand what you mean, right? If you want to add extra clarity to it, then you can add columns, you can add comments to say, comments like to do this and say, this gets all columns relating to the claims, and yeah, this way you can add a column this a comment this way, right? You can add a comment this way. Also create a category of the data. So this explains or tells someone, okay, this code base is this particular code, this is what it's doing. So with this, someone can take it, understand what code you wrote, and then continue from where you left off. So that's continuity, so that you can make your code readable, understandable for people or anyone within your team. Yeah, so indentation also makes it clear so that people can read. So when you take this one particular one, you know, okay, so this select applies this, that, these columns and all that, right? It makes it very clean and understandable. Now let's implement our case when statement. So the case we wrote was case when the claim type is equal, right? When a claim type is equal to P, what did we say? You can say then give us pending, right? Else give us in progress. So you end your case when, you end it as claim and as category, comma, this way. Now we know this is a data frame that we create. So if you run this, it should create a data frame with the columns that we have. So let's go to the next line. You can see the columns. This is what it provides. This is the data frame, and then we can display the claims this way. And let's see the data if it really implemented or it really worked, the case when statement in SparkSQL. Perfect. So you can see this also categorized the column for us properly. It categorized the column for us properly. Yeah, that's great. So in this video, thank you for joining me. In this video, we were able to implement a case when statement in SQL, where we categorized some claim type to pending and in progress. Same way we did this, we implemented this same logic in PySpark, where we use the when otherwise code or case statement or conditional code to categorize a claim type from pending, from P to pending and I to in progress. We did the same with SparkSQL. So this is good. Thanks for joining me. It's been your favorite data engineer. Like, share, comment, and tell me if this code is going to improve your code base in SQL, PySpark, and SparkSQL. See you in my next video. Bye bye.